it's important that we have the most efficient and sustainable means to use this stuff as possible. Hey everybody, I want to talk to you today about why I believe what Apple is doing and what's already possible on some of the latest Apple tech is some of the most sustainable, and at least for me, it helps me sleep at night. I don't know about you, but just trying to be a bit more consumer friendly and a bit more sustainable in how we use technology. So I want to share some of the best tips I've learned to make my iPhone and my technology as sustainable as possible. So one of the biggest tips and tricks that I've got at this point, it's, at least on the iPhone, it's unfortunately kind of locked behind newer phones from iPhone 15 and up. Hopefully we'll see them implement this in a sort of software way on some of the older phones. They kind of claim that it's only possible on some of the newer phones with the newest chips. But when the iPhone 15 came out, one of the biggest things, they switched over to USB-C. So all of your USB-C cables, and everybody can use USB-C cables and not have to buy new cables, and all your tech can work with the same thing. So that's a big part of it. Another big piece is that they implemented a special feature. I'll show you a quick video of this in the settings. A special feature inside the battery settings that allows you to change your charging feature to 80% charging capacity limit. So essentially the idea is that once your phone charges to 80%, the phone will cut off charging to the battery, and it's, I guess, quite important, quite healthy for the battery, for the lithium-ion batteries, to stay between 20 and 80%. Going outside these ranges into the extremes, it's like living in top of Mount Everest, or it's like living in Death Valley.
Oh, hell no!
You don't want to be in these extremes. Nobody, nothing was really meant to survive and thrive in these extremes. So you want to keep your battery between 20 and 80%, and this 80% charging limit stops charging your battery and basically just pulls power directly from your power adapter once your iPhone reaches 80%. So what's the big takeaway from this? It doesn't use the battery. And one of the biggest things that's a consumable component on phones are the batteries. And lithium-ion batteries, they haven't quite gotten to a point where they can really recycle these in a good way. And so this is huge, because if you're like a lot of us, where you're sitting at a desk, you're sitting in a car, and you can just plug your phone in, essentially you can use your phone without having to use the battery, which extends the life of the battery incredibly. So I've almost had my iPhone 15 since October 2023, almost had it for about a year. It's getting closer to a year. And you'll see from the video that I've hardly used the battery. The battery is still at 99% health. And the cycle counts, how many times the battery's been from 100 to 0, 0 to 100, 100 to 0, all this sort of stuff. The cycle counts are also incredibly low. So this is huge for keeping the battery and keeping the phone, all in all, in a very long-term sustainable way. And the same sort of thing could be done on your MacBook. So I mostly leave my MacBook Air plugged in, charging, but it's not charging. I leave it plugged in almost all the time, unless I really have to take it somewhere. And the benefit of this is, again, essentially, there's some special software. Unfortunately, Apple hasn't released that 80% charging limit on their MacBooks, on the sort of macOS software. They haven't released it. Hopefully they will, because they are gunning to be this crazy, super green, super sustainable company. They say that they want all their products to be carbon neutral, running off of green energy, a lot of recycled, no plastic, and that everything should be sort of running off of green electricity, renewable energy, and potentially maybe carbon neutral by 2030, which is a big claim. Every time I walk by an Apple store, I kind of am a geek and a nerd, and I go talk to them and I ask them about these sustainability goals and what's really realistic there. And so anyways, I digress. Getting back to the point, there's also some software. It's called Al Dente. I was a bit skeptical to use it, but I did as much reading and research and looking at what people have to say about it. But essentially, Al Dente offers the same sort of thing. You can set what's the charging limit, so you can set it somewhere around 70 to 80%, like the 80% rule in the newer iPhones. And so it'll stop using the battery and just pull directly from your external power once it reaches 80%. And again, it is not cheap to replace the batteries in these things. These batteries can't really be recycled. They're also dangerous, they're toxic. If they were to get pierced or something were to happen, they can be somewhat explosive. They can release toxic chemicals, and so best to use these things as little as possible. And so if you can kind of leave it plugged in like I do. This is one of the best things you can do to kind of have a sustainable technology experience from my perspective. And again, Apple, there's a lot of things that they need to improve. Like one of these big topics that you see in the EU, countries across Europe, France has been making big pushes, but also you see it in America, the right to repair. That you as an individual, you as a consumer, have the right to repair your technology, and not that it just needs to get chucked in the trash. So this is being pushed and being talked about more and more, and Apple is integrating this to their products to make it easier to repair them so that they can be used instead of, basically given up on and thrown out. So that being said, I still think when you look at some different reports from example, Greenpeace, I think Greenpeace has done a technology survey every few years and looked at some of the most sustainable tech. Apple is definitely usually at the top of their list, along with Fairphone and some other. It's really kind of Fairphone and Apple, and I think they're seemingly by a significant margin ahead of a lot of their competitors. And I think a big part of that too is Apple has been using. Basically, I think they phased out most plastic or all plastic from their packaging. They're also very good at recycling and reusing a lot of the aluminum alloy and a lot of components on these MacBooks and iPhones. And so, they obviously, I think one of the biggest things they need to do is to stop releasing new tech every year. I think it would still be cool, still be sexy, still be exciting if they did it every 2 years or every 3 years. And honestly, I think there'd be bigger hype because that hype would build up. But obviously, they make a lot of money by building this up every year and turning it into a big spectacle and into a big event. But as we know, for example, whether it's movies or video games, they don't release a new one every year, especially the good ones, right? Like a Christopher Nolan movie or Skyrim and Oblivion or Legend of Zelda. They don't release these on an annual basis. They take years and usually closer to a decade to work on the quality and come up with something really spectacular and really incredible. And so I think Apple could, I think it's going to have to, if it wants to reach these sustainability goals that it has, I think it's going to have to actually cut down on its release schedule. So again, I know I'm not whitewashing here and greenwashing, saying that Apple's doing everything perfect and everything great, but minus the Fairphone, which is, again, you can look it up. It's a Dutch smartphone company that's very modular. You can take out components and interchange them, exchange them, repair them very, very easily. And so you can essentially upgrade the phone over time. If in 2 or 3 years you want to put in a new battery, put in a new camera, put in a new screen, all that sort of stuff, you can do it very easily. But beyond that, it still seems like iPhone, for your mainstream type of phone, this Apple and their MacBooks, their iPhones, they're some of the most sustainable tech. And another big part of it too that I would add is they're making claims that as they come out with their new chips, their A16, A17, A18 Bionic Apple Silicon chips, that these are getting more and more efficient. They're getting more powerful, but they're focusing more and more on the power efficiency, that they actually use less energy. And I recently saw a video that talked about they're starting to get down to these crazy small levels, like 3 nanometer chips. And they make claims that basically when this is going to happen, that your iPhone battery should be able to last for 3 or 4 days. So again, obviously compared to some big things in industry and concrete and agriculture and transportation, logistics, some of this tech stuff is a bit of a drop in the bucket, but more and more people are buying more tech. They're using the tech more, and it's important that we have the most efficient and sustainable means to use this stuff as possible. And from my pretty serious curiosity and interest in the subject on climate change and power efficiency, Apple tech seems to be some of the best we've got so far. So I'm not sponsored. I don't get any money from Apple. If anything, I give too much money to Apple, like the rest of us. But if you're looking and you care about climate change and sustainability, Apple seems to be some of the best. And one other point that I hadn't mentioned is that they have a very good trade-in program. So whether you're trading it into your telecom company, let's say in America, like Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, if you're willing and able to trade in, they have a great trade-in program, and they'll refurbish that phone, and they'll also refurbish your Mac, and they'll put that back into the ecosystem. So there's a very, very high chance that's going to be used again somehow, some way. Even if it's too old, there's a very good chance that they're going to be able to reuse a lot of those materials in their new phones. So obviously, biggest thing is reducing like this annual yearly cycle of new tech. Got to reduce that. But the fact that they'll be able to reuse a lot of those materials and also basically give that Mac a new life, that's huge. And the resale value and the continued value of these things is very high. So there's a good chance. A little example would be, before this, I had my Windows PC from 2018, 2019. It was a Dell, and it lasted for about 4 or 5 years. I mean, it still was alive, but it's heavy. The battery, the capacity was terrible. Like I went from probably 6 to 8 hours down to like an hour and a half. So it's very annoying to lug this thing around. And then I also needed to bring my charging cable and all that stuff with me. And for me, as more of a traveler and a nomad, that's also not very great. So basically taking that laptop and looking about what can I do with it, it went from basically almost $1,000, $900 for that laptop, that PC, that Dell. After 4 or 5 years, the value of it and the usability of it was quite low, and I could hardly sell the thing. On the other hand, I know lots of people that have MacBooks and iPhones for years, and they're able to trade them back in. And then they're basically able to get a huge discount off of the newest or some of the latest products. And so that's huge as well, because that incentivizes that circular, reusable sort of cycle and economy. And again, if it gets a second life and the product's actually used for, instead of 3 to 5 years, it's used for 8 to 10 years. That's massive. And Apple's really good at that. And it's because they make quality products and they make valuable products that people want to have. And that means less people are likely to abuse them, disregard them, toss them out. So that's definitely a big piece of this topic, that circular reusability and that sort of refurbished marketplace. So anyways, I don't want to come off as like a ridiculous, huge Apple fanboy, but they have a lot to offer in these terms of green, sustainability, reduce, reuse, recycle. So it's a very big component here. So that's my take, and that's how by using Apple you can make your products even more sustainable. So take care. Hopefully you can take care of your products and your technology as well, and give them a long life. All right, see you next time.